So we're back to the same question. Why am I seeing empty shelves in stores? It should be achievable, right? You've got all this technology, you've got all these great people, but we still see empty shelves in shops. Hello again and welcome to the Retail Podcast with Slimstock. I'm Will Seven and we're here again to talk about what's important to retailers and some of the hot topics in the retail sector. I've spent my career in boardrooms talking to retailers about how we can drive efficiencies into their businesses. And today I'm joined by Peter Bocken, the head of retail at Slimstock, to talk about the murky world of automated store replenishment. Hi, Peter.
I will.
Again, can you start with a quick intro of yourself and your career in retail, please?
Fine. Obviously, I'm the head of retail within Slimstock, doing that now for 14 years, serving all kind of retailers in food, fashion, and non-food. And before that, I was working myself in retail, both in the supermarket business as well as in the non-food business. I had some commercial roles. I also had some supply chain roles. And this is actually where I also met Slimstock for the first time 16 years ago. Actually, I also bought the software to replenish our shops at that time.
Okay.
We were the first ones actually here in the Netherlands.
Oh, wow. First retailers.
Yeah, first retailers.
Oh, fantastic. All right. So let's get into the nitty gritty of the situation. You know, I walk into a lot of shops, not always by choice, and I see lots of empty spaces on the shelves. You know, why? What's going on there?
Well, it's a good question, and it's the question normally when I'm at a party, my friends, they always ask the same thing, Will, but maybe it's good to dive into it later on in the podcast and start, let's say, with some principles about automated replenishment.
Okay.
If that's good for you.
Yeah, it sounds good.
All right.
So let's get into that then. So let's talk about the automated replenishment principles. What is it? What do you mean by it?
Yeah, for me, automated replenishment, maybe to go back, as I said, 16 years ago, when we ran a non-food retail chain here in the Netherlands. At that time, we were in a stage that a lot of companies were still working either manual, so really had people in the shops ordering manually, faxing things to the warehouse to get their orders picked. And actually, at that time, we were already working with an ERP system where it was possible to have a min-max in your ERP, a min-max system. So for a certain item, you set a min at 3. Once the stock level drops under 3, you get replenished up to the maximum.
Yeah.
At that time, a lot of retailers, they also had the option to use multiple min-maxes. So you had a min-max for an A item or B item or C item, but that still was difficult, I would say, to manage, because at that time, we had to say that, for instance, if you were an A shop in bicycles, then it would always get replenished more than a C shop. However, we said, okay, it needs to be more dynamic. You're not an A shop in bicycles. You're an A shop, for instance, in bicycles for children,
right?
And not even for children, maybe even for children, for cheap bikes for children. So it's very specific. And the same we saw, let's say, with different brands. We saw that our shops in Amsterdam, they would sell different brands compared to the eastern side of the Netherlands. So that's what triggered us at that time to say, okay, well, let's make it fully dynamic, really dive into it at the lowest level per item, per location, per day. We need to come up with a forecast. We need to come up with a safety stock level. We need to come up with the optimum stock level to make it fully dynamic.
Fine. All right. And so I guess we'll be getting into the details of what you mean by all of those buzzwords later in the podcast. But let's think about now. People talk about forecast and replenishment. Or allocation and replenishment. Let's talk about forecast and replenishment. What's the important thing about forecast and replenishment? Where does it all start? What's the reason for it?
Yeah, when we talk about forecasting and replenishment, actually, I always say, well, you should talk about replenishment because initially the goal is to replenish the right amount at the right time for the right shop. And to do that, obviously, you need to have a forecast. And the better your forecast is, the better your replenishment proposal will be. So the same when people come to us, when people come to Slimstock and they say, well, you are a forecasting tool or you have a forecasting tool. I say, well, obviously we do forecasting, but in the end, it's not an aim itself. It's always like the way to get to the right replenishment proposal. And I think this is where retail differs, let's say, from wholesale. For a wholesaler, you only need to have stock to capture your forecast. You need to have some safety stock, and that's it.
Yeah.
But then when you enter a shop and you will only have the stock for the customer that you expect, so that's the forecast, and the customer that you might expect, that's your safety stock, then it can still happen, let's say that for this item, I only have, let's say, 1 or 2 pieces on the shelf. But that doesn't look nice. So in that case, we also want to have something like a presentation stock.
Sure.
And that's purely a visible thing because when you enter a shop, it needs to look nice. And in that way, you always need to balance forecast, safety stock, and presentation stock. And bear in mind that when we work, let's say, for the do-it-yourself chain with pretty low rotations, pretty low stock rotations, their stock turn is about 2.5 per year. Then a lot of those items that are placed over there, they don't move at all.
Yeah.
So actually, they purely be driven, let's say, by their presentation stock settings. So it's very important to have the right mix between your forecast, your safety stock, and your presentation stock. And actually, on top of that, and this is actually where I think it becomes very interesting, you will have a lot of business rules that will decide for you when you will move what stock, or if you are scarce in goods in the warehouse, what items do you want to replenish, or if you want to phase in an item or to phase out item, based on what kind of scenarios do you do it. So it's very business rule driven. And I think that's a main difference when you want to introduce shop replenishment in an automated way compared with replenishment in general at warehouse level.
So I guess what it sounds like, you're building the complexity. I'm starting to see why there might be some, but I'm not going to let you get away with the question later in the interview about, why are we seeing empty spots on shelves? But let's talk about how things have changed. So, you shared a bit about your career and about how things have progressed through it. What's different now to when you were, other than the making the orders at store level, what else has changed within the replenishment world?
I would say that many retailers are much more promotion driven than we used to be.
Yeah.
And obviously, we also see that we have much more product introductions. And when you look at the past, over then, the assortment was much more stable. And we want to try new things. We want to have a lot of in-out items to push them to the shops and to give it a go. So I would say it's much more dynamic. And what we've also noticed is that once you start replenishing shops and you also have your own web shop and external channels, then you also need to prioritize which items will go to what channel. So that becomes even more complex.
Yeah, sure. And is it the same for all types of retailer, would you say?
In essence, inventory optimization is the same for everybody. We always have to answer the question, when do I need to send how many goods?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you have a bag of salad, if it's a garbage bin, if it's a pair of trousers, whatever. So in essence, for everybody, it's the same. But I would say the focus of a food retailer, a non-food retailer, and a fashion retailer is different. And when I started at Slimstock, a lot of non-food people, they came to me and said, okay, can you free up some cash? If you can get out, let's say 20% of my stock, then we free up cash. But once we came into the supermarket business, well, for them, freeing up 20% of their stock value, you're talking about 1 or 2 days.
Sure.
With payment terms of 60 days, well, it doesn't make sense. So their focus is fully different. They are focusing on availability and on avoiding shrinkage, and have the best balance in that.
Yeah, I guess the easiest way to improving profitability is maximizing that full price sell through in the store, whatever type of retailer you are.
Yeah, especially in fashion business, you see that.
Yeah.
Once the stock is leveraged well across the country, then actually once your sales period starts, your markdown can be less. You don't have to go up to 70%.
Yeah.
Maybe you can stop with 50% or 40%. And then you start making money. Or you can even buy, let's say, new goods purely for running your sales period.
Yeah. All right, so let's drill down into some detail. Talk to me, let's go back to the conversation about how you calculate the optimal replenishment figure.
Yeah, as I said, well, obviously the forecast is very important. But what you see in retail, especially at store replenishment, actually you see a lot of items that are moving slow. It's like slow-moving business. And it's funny, I sometimes make the comparison with people in the spare part business. And when you are in the spare part business, most items, they don't sell at all.
Yeah.
You just sell, let's say, 1 or 2 pieces per year. And when you look at the B items, your C items in a non-food retail environment, actually those are slow movers. So you will have different forecasting methods to come up with the right forecast for those items. And what you see nowadays is that AI kicks in. Artificial intelligence will make it more easy to come up with a better forecast.
Sure.
But that's just one thing. In my opinion, actually deciding what safety stock settings you want to have is even more important. Getting the right safety stock, that has to do with service levels. And actually, that's a management or a board decisions.
Sure.
So for us, we truly believe in structuring your assortment, telling, okay, these are A items, B items, C items. And then actually it's up to the management to decide, do I want to have 99% service level on my A items, for instance? And then you can say, okay, but on my private label A items, it needs to be a little bit higher, like 99.5. But in case those items have a very short shelf life, well, then I want to drop my service levels. So this is like playing around. And it's actually about how do we want to meet our customers.
Yeah.
And that's different, I would say, when you are a high-end supermarket or a discounter. They will have different service level settings.
And I guess I was meeting with a retailer in the UK a couple of weeks ago, and even today, you're talking about the different target service levels by category of product. What we would be ideally talking about is a store-specific categorization, whereas at the moment you're still seeing a lot of quite major retailers clustering of stores. They're not working at that store-specific level, and I guess that's true automation at that stage.
Correct. And in my opinion, everything should be at the lowest level. So per item, let's say per day, per shop.
Yeah.
And you will have different service levels. And for me, one item is possible that it's an A item, and that same item could be a C item for you with a lower service level. And it's even possible if you have, let's say, more important shops, or you are really next to a competitor.
Yeah.
And then it's possible to say, okay, then I want to have higher service level settings in that shop, in that specific shop.
Yeah. And I guess that's the tactics that you were talking about earlier, being able to pull the levers to make a difference in that minutiae of detail.
Yeah, for sure. And we call it like a business rule. So when you implement shop replenishment, it's really about standing a lot of hours in front of a whiteboard and really sketching like, okay, this is what we want to achieve.
Yeah.
Then you will simulate it in the software, and you can see the outcome. And then in the end, well, you start to tune your system.
Okay.
So it's really like engineering. And sometimes people also ask me, well, what's the difference between implementing, let's say, replenishment at warehouse level, so purely centrally, like how much do I need to order at my supplier? And what's the difference then in implementing shop replenishment? And the thing is that once you start implementing a replenishment system centrally at a warehouse, that's really like a supply chain thing. And you only need supply chain, you need the IT department, and for the rest, well, nobody could be involved. It's better to involve people, but
Sure.
you could do it by yourself. But once you start doing things for the shops, well, marketing, they have an opinion, category management has got an opinion,
Sure.
store operations has got an opinion. And well, it's always different. So it's really combining all those things, what are in the heads of the people, trying to combine that in tactics, in rulings, so that the system will start increasing stock levels once the sun starts shining.
Yeah. So let's go back over it. You talked about the forecast. You've spoken about the safety stock. We've looked at presentation stocks. We've also spoken about AI, and we've spoken about the rules and constraints to optimize the flow of goods. So it's difficult. So we're back to the same question: why am I seeing empty shelves in stores? It should be achievable, right? You've got all this technology, you've got all these great people, but we still see empty shelves in shops.
Well, obviously, I also see it a lot. And what I always say to the people, once you start implementing store replenishment, get out to the stores to see what the effect is of what you're trying to achieve. And it happens a lot that, from my headquarter point of view, you are reaching your targets. I see on my A items, I've got 99% availability. And then once I enter a shop, I see 10 out of 100 shelves which are empty. So it's 90%.
Yeah.
So we think we achieve 99%, but in essence, from a consumer's point of view, it's 90%. And then it's really about diving into it. Okay, what's happening? So I always also, when I was in retail myself, each week I send out my people, go to the shops, start checking what's really happening from a consumer point of view. And then it turns out that there are a lot of issues with stock accuracy. So people are not counting right. I have stock levels in the system of 4. My optimum order level, let's say, would be 3. So I'm not going to replenish anything.
Sure.
But if these 4 items are not there, or what also happens, they are in the back of the shop, and people are not going to fill them, well, then nothing is going to happen. What happens also a lot is that people are not following their planograms. So people have been phasing out items in the planogram, but the shelf labels, the tickets, they are still on the shelf. So there will never be replenishment anymore. So in most of the cases, and normally I see it's like 80% of the cases, it has to do with internal store operations. It's really like a process which is not being carried out right, I would say. And then let's say the last 20% of the out of stocks, well, it's either about not having the stock in the warehouse, so you cannot replenish. And then it leaves, let's say, only 10%. And then it comes out to this 1% availability, actually the figure that the guy in headquarters is already seeing when he looks in his system. But as I said, from a consumer point of view, it looks poor. So you need to do something with it. And this is actually why I think shop replenishment is not about implementing a tool. It's implementing a way of working. And you should align all different departments.
Yeah. And I think that interaction with the store team, who are still, they're front facing, they're there to support the customer, building that trust between a new automated replenishment process and which is centrally managed rather than the old paper and pen that they've always been used to, is something that I think we can maybe touch on in a little while. But first of all, people talk about allocation and replenishment and push versus pull replenishment. What's the difference?
Well, we have push and we have pull. And when we talk about allocation, we talk about push. And initially, this comes more from out of the fashion business. And people have, let's say, 1,000 items coming in. Then I say, okay, 70% of these items I want to push according to a certain profile. And then I'm 100% sure that 700 of these items are being pushed, shipped to the shops. When you talk about automated replenishment, then it's about pool. So it's an automated system where my optimum order levels will differ during the week, during the months. And based on my optimum order level compared with my stock level, I will pool actually the items to the shops.
How can replenishment work for you to be more efficient in the central planning team?
In the central planning team, obviously, when you start replenishing, it takes time, especially when you compare that, let's say, with what we did in the past in retail. We just set some min-maxes in the ERP system, or I have store managers ordering themselves. Yeah. So setting up replenishment will definitely not save you time in the headquarters. However, it will save you time, a lot of time in the shops, and it will save you time also in the warehouse. And especially nowadays where efficiency is becoming much more important because labor, isn't there. It's very hard to attract people, to get people to work in the warehouse. Sometimes they're simply not there. And if they are there, they ask more money nowadays. Yeah. So we want to pick in a very efficient way. And what we are calling then balancing, that's what we're trying to achieve. So what we are trying to achieve is that if I know, for instance, for the day after tomorrow, I have people in my warehouse which can pick, let's say, 100,000 order lines. I don't want to come up with store orders, let's say, up to 90,000, because then I have to pay the people for 100,000. But the other way around, if it's 110,000 order lines coming out of the system, these guys, they can't handle. So this is when we start to manipulate actually our shop replenishment, and based on all kind of priority rules, then we know exactly which items we need to replenish. If it comes out, let's say normally at 90, then we will add 10,000 order lines. So we will meet this 100,000 order lines. Or the other way around, if without doing anything, 110,000 order lines comes out, then we will scratch 10,000 order lines. Yeah. And we will not scratch items which are out of stock, for instance, or we will not scratch promotional items or A items. But we could, for instance, scrap an item which for which we would only, let's say, replenish a presentation stock, an item which goes from 3 to 2, while you would only sell, let's say, 1 per month. From a presentation stock point of view, well, you can replenish that item, but it's not really necessary to meet your service levels towards your customer.
Okay. And I guess the nice thing about that central planning system is that the stores have more time to trade, to be store managers, right? To spend time with their customers.
Yeah, correct. And in my opinion, a store manager should manage the store, the team, the customers, and automate everything what you can automate, I would say. Yeah. And make sure that the outcomes are good enough for him, that he will trust the system, and that he also, when he goes on holiday, that he goes on holiday fairly easily.
Yeah, and I guess the other option is the scarce stock, right? So if you're low on an item, back in the days when it was everyone ordering through paper and pen, every store thought they were the most important store to receive the stock. I guess having a system to support the automated allocation of that scarce stock going to the right place is a job done in an instant rather than a big battle with all the stores.
Yeah, for sure. But also on the other way around, if items were not performing that well and you had the last 200 pieces, everybody said, okay, I don't want to have that. Yeah. But right now, you will do it together.
So let's just try and finish off the conversation with giving an understanding of what the basic things you need to have in place, what the prerequisites you need to be able to deliver an automated replenishment process within a retailer.
I think, as we discussed before, for me, the most important thing is that you have replenishment in place, and that all departments are involved in setting up a right replenishment process. So it is about store operations, it is about category management, it is about marketing, it is about supply chain, obviously. So everybody is involved. And process is key. Having the right process and capture that in software logic, in business rules. So it's really thinking upfront, if something happens, what do I want the system to apply? What do I want the system to do? And it's always good to do that upfront instead of just start thinking of it when something happens.
Yeah.
So it's really about setting up scenarios, about setting up the parameters in a right way, setting up ABCs, setting up service level settings, and then everything actually goes automatically. But obviously then also it's about managing your KPIs. So every day you come in, you will check, okay, is my availability still in line with what I would expect? And if not, then I dive into it. But you don't want to dive into an individual item per shop. The system must take care of that. But I can dive into, for instance, if a certain item is out of stock in more than 10% of the shops.
Yeah.
And then probably I missed a signal. And this is actually where a system can say, okay, just help me. You need to step in and I need to bring some more market knowledge to it.
Yeah. So it sounds like what we're saying again is the right processes, the right people trained and able to do their job are the key drivers before the technology. You need the technology to deliver the solution in the end, but if you can't get the processes right and the people right, then what's the point?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Thanks again, Peter, for joining us today. I appreciate you joining us. If anybody else wants to share any topics they want us to cover on this podcast, then please feel free to share them with us. Or even if you want to come and join us in the hot seat, then do get in touch. Thanks again for listening to the Slimstock Retail Podcast.